Good morning, everybody. Looks like we got this fixed, so we will get started in just a second. All right, let's go ahead and get started. If anybody wants to jump in and share something live, there should be a spot up in the top right corner where you can raise your hand or something like that, and then I can plug you in here so you can talk and share anything like that. So we're going to cover the one thing part two. Starts on chapter 10, ends on chapter 12. So last time in part one, we talked about the myths and misconceptions about why we can't do something or things that we do believe in. The just truthy enough that it's believable, stuff like that. All those myths we had to get through. So now it comes down to basically asking a question. A focusing question. What is another word for focus? Another word for focus. How about concentrate? Concentrate, the definition of concentrate is to focus one's attention on a particular object, gather together, come together, but the one I like the most is increase the strength or proportion by removing the diluting agent. So think about concentrated orange juices, those little cans of frozen concentrate. Took all the water out. It's increasing the strength or proportion. So by focusing on something, you're increasing your strength of it. Okay. Andrew Carnegie, his one thing was steel mill. And in the book, it talks about where he said, the great secret was to concentrate your energy, thought, and capital exclusively upon the business in which you're engaged. Having begun on one line, resolve to fight it out on that line. So what is he meaning by, resolve to fight it out on that one line? Taking a stance, being committed, concentrating on that one thing, all in, no turning back, no detour, just holding the line. Okay. One of the terms I like to use when, going into business and creating your business plan, you need to create that solid business plan. It's like a ski jump. You're not going to take off down a ski jump, unless you plan to complete it and land it, because there's no turning back. Once you start down that slope, you don't have poles, you don't have brakes. The only way is just to bail. And that's bad. So your only result is you just got to land it. That's your only hope. So your business plan is the ski jump. Stick to it. Land it. No detours. All in. Okay. So money is important to us. I know it's important to me. So when we hold on to it tightly, when we do spend money or invest it into something, we tend to pay attention to it. Right? So if we are, making a little investment in a little company, we're going to watch that thing like a hawk. Or stock market. We start playing with stocks, we're going to be watching the stocks like 6 times a day and see how much we made. So we're paying attention to it because it's our money. We're putting it to work. So he talked about, Carnegie talked about scattered capital means scattered brains. And that makes sense. So if I'm investing capital in a bunch of different businesses, I'm watching a bunch of different things. If I'm investing money in if I'm doing real estate, but then I'm also doing Herbalife, and then I'm also doing, Sensi, or have a part-time job too. I mean, I'm scattered. There's no concentrate. There's no one line. There's no all in. There's too many detours. Okay. We all here, don't put all your eggs in one basket. In fact, the last brokerage I was at, it was big. Don't put all your eggs in this one basket. Be diverse. You got to be ready. You got to be able to change. You know what? Yes, you have to be able to change and adapt quickly. But if you're concentrating on your line and you put all of your focus into research and paying attention to your one line, you'll know the changes that are coming and you'll already be adapting. Okay? Everybody puts stock in this adage. I'm guilty of it. I believed it for a long time. It sounded like a great idea. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Our parents said it. Lived by it. So what's that doing? When you agree that don't put all your eggs in one basket, isn't that admitting failure right off the bat? Not committing, not having faith, not having hope. Somewhere in the back of your mind knowing that that might not be the right direction. So I got to get a bunch of different baskets to put eggs in. So there's one of two things. Either you're holding the wrong basket, or you're not doing the one thing to make sure it stays full and protected. So you got to think about that. Am I holding the right basket? Do I know enough to protect it? Those are the two things you need to keep in mind. Don't put them all in your basket, but put them in the right basket. Because if you're trying to protect 3 different baskets, you're going to fail. All right. Do we go out and get 2 or 3 different families just in case one of them fails? Just so we have a couple backups. If this family sucks, I got 2 more to fall back on. Do we have multiple babies just in case we fail as a parent on the first one? Is that the reason we have multiple kids? Just in case? None of this. None of this makes sense. We have it because we want it, because we're committed to it. We have a family and we're committed to that family. We're going to make it work. We have kids because we're committed to the kids and we're committed to the idea of having kids and raising them. This whole don't put your eggs in one basket should just completely leave your mind. What the heck are we doing? Dean said, would we talk to others the way we talk to ourselves? Okay, he just said that. Talked about, what about would we talk to our kids the way we talk to ourselves? We don't start out a conversation with our kids giving them excuses if they don't succeed before you give them the actual tasks and result you'd like. We tell them exactly what we want and expect, and then we're disappointed if they don't succeed and we don't take excuses. Why don't we treat ourselves like that? When we think about things, go back to don't put all your eggs in one basket. And we believe in that type of thinking, we're instantly, every time we think of doing something, we're thinking of, fallback. It's like, well, if this doesn't work, I still have this. Or if I can't get it done, it's because of this. We think of excuses before we actually do it. So we're already committing to failure. When we tell our kids to do something, we expect them to do it right. And when they come back and have an excuse, we're all over them. No excuses. Okay. So we need to stop being hypocrites. We need to move on from the, creating failure, creating options and excuses. We're just loading our lives with that. Front loading, really. So, just do it. My word of the year this year seems to be simplify. I think it comes out of my mouth at least a few times a day. That word needs to be in your back of your mind. Simplify. That is our biggest problem in this industry, in our lives, is we complicate things. Overcomplicate all the time. Okay? The secret to getting ahead is simple, you know? It's, just freaking start. Take a step, one step in front of the other. Stop calculating the journey, because the longer you sit and ponder, the easier it is to talk yourself out of it. We're all guilty of that. Totally guilty of that. What about the gym? I'm guilty of driving to the gym, sitting in the parking lot, and looking at my phone and email and Facebook for 5 minutes, and they're like, I got something to do. I don't have 30 minutes to go in and work out. I don't have time. And I drive off. That's bad. It'd probably be better if I didn't even drive up there, talk myself out before I even wasted the gas. So we have to get started. We have to take the step. Then we have to take another step. Stop calculating the journey. We spend a lot of time getting ready to get ready. Get started, achieve that first success, because when you make that first step and you achieve that first success, it fuels you to take the next step and the next success. And the steps get bigger, the successes get bigger, and the journey gets shorter. Okay? So just get started. So what is the first step? We have to ask a question. Not just any question, has to be a great question, says Gary Keller. In his book, in chapter 10, he talked about a poem. It's okay, I read it, but it comes down to the last 2 lines of the poem. All right? It says that any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. So think about that for a second. That any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. So it comes down to choice. And I asked of life, so question. What question are you asking of life? How great is your question? The bigger, the better the question, the bigger, the better the answer. The greater, the more extraordinary the question, the more extraordinary the answer. The more extraordinary the question, the more extraordinary your life. Okay? That any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. All right, so how we phrase our questions that we ask ourselves, how many times do we ask ourselves questions? And some people talk to ourselves a lot. I don't keep track. I don't pay attention to how much I talk to myself, but I'm sure I do. So it's how we phrase the questions we ask ourselves that determines what our life becomes. If we just keep asking ourselves simple questions, we're not going to get much output from ourselves. So what is this great focusing question? Okay, what is it? What's this magic question? Focusing question. Okay, what is my one thing? Okay, what is my one thing? What is my one thing right now? All right, that's a 2-part question. What is my one thing? My one thing for this year is to get on that hammock right there between Christmas and New Year's, spend the whole week on that hammock on that beach reading. That's my one thing. I want to pull that off. Okay? So what's my one thing right now? What do I have to do to get there? What can I do right now? So the question, the ultimate focusing question is, what's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? All right? So when we break it down to the simplicity of it, what's my one thing? What's my one thing right now? It's both a map of a big picture and it's the compass for the next smallest move. All right, so the next smallest move is what we have control of right now. I don't have much control over this big picture, my big one thing, getting on that hammock right now. It's going to take time, but I do have control over what I do right now. All right, so the next smallest moves. When you think of what's my one thing right now to get to my one thing, it allows you to ignore the doable. Again, we go back to the extraordinary. All right. If my one thing is to make it through the day, I mean, I'm just going to be focused on the doable things. If my one thing is getting there to that hammock, my one things are going to be way beyond doable. Okay. It gets us past doable, helps us aim for the best decision. We start doing the necessary. Okay. That gets us to that first domino. That first the smallest domino. Isn't that cool? We focus on the smallest domino and it takes off and knocks down all of them, all the way to this massive domino, which is that hammock. Okay. Think about that. How cool is that? That all we need to do is find that tiny domino and just whack away at it. We don't have to sit there and try and knock this huge domino down and expend all of our energy and resources trying to knock this thing down in one swoop. We just have to focus on the one little one in front of us when we find it and knock it down and let it take care of things. So we keep asking again and again till all these tasks are stacked up and prioritized. We keep asking, what's the one thing I can do right now? Okay. So that once you start, the one at the end either gets completed or becomes unnecessary by the time you get there. All right. This will happen. If you find out your one thing I can do right now, and you keep asking that and stacking them up, and when you get them prioritized in order, this happens. You knock that first domino now, and it starts taking out dominoes along the way, and each task becomes easier because you've set it up that way. So this was in the book, and I love this. All right. When you are so focused on doing the right task, okay, the right task first, everything falls in line. So when you're focused on the right task, you have the right mindset first, the right skill first, the right relationship first. So you see the pattern? Could you imagine building this habit where your life could go? If you created this habit would create, if you keep asking your question, what's the one thing I can do right now? Okay. And when you focus on the right task first, everything becomes first. Right task, right mindset, right skill, right relationship. See how the domino effect? Okay. When you focus on something right, it puts you in the right place because your mindset's in the right place. You use your skills right. It opens you for opportunity because you're always in the right place. You end up with the right person. You end up surrounding yourself with the right people. That little domino is just focusing on the right task. It leads to tons of things. So what's the one thing? Let's analyze the question here. What's the one thing I can do? Okay, I can do. First part of this question, what's the one thing I can do? So we can only pick one thing at a time here. And remember from the first part, nothing's equally important. Nothing in life is equally important. No person, no task, no nothing. Everything has a different importance. All right. So can do is an action. Could have, should have, would have are intentions. So let's not focus on things we could do, should do, or would do. Focus on tasks we can do. And that's taking action. The one thing I can do right now. Okay. Second part, such by doing. Those words, such by doing. It's the bridge between doing something and doing something for a specific purpose. So doing something you could do, probably not for a specific purpose, or else it wouldn't be could. Doing something you can do will lead me to this hammock. That's the bridge, can do. All right, second part of it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary. So this one thing that I can do right now is your lever. So the first thing you do is the size of your lever that you use as leverage to move your object. So the bigger your one thing in the end, the bigger your tasks are going to be at the beginning. It makes you dig deep. It makes you go get a bigger lever to move this big object. All right. So if you get a small lever, and smaller, desires will require smaller levers, smaller tasks. A lot of people do this. Average people will set their goals so that they can reach them. And their tasks will be, minuscule. They'll fall into the, yeah, I could do that, but I'm doing okay. Or I should do that. I know I should do this. Have coaching sessions. Why aren't you doing it? I know I should be doing it. But why aren't you doing it? Because you're not doing it. Either you can or you can't. Okay? Either you can get the internet technology or you can't. If you can't and you're focused on, just working sphere and relationships and networking, do that. Can do that. Don't say, well, I should look into internet. If you can't do it, don't look into it. Okay? Build what you have. What's your one thing? What's the one thing I can do right now to get me there? Model after things that people have done right that you can do. All right? Not that what you see other people doing and you think you should do those things. Do what you can do. Okay? So that's chapter 10, asking the focusing question. Chapter 11, we talk about the success of habits. All right? I'm going to say this first. I put it at the end, but I'm going to say this first for this chapter summed up right here. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. Think about that. People do not decide their futures. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. This habit is a lever. If we commit to doing something, that's a task. We're doing that. But if we develop it into a habit, think about how big that lever becomes. Think about that lever. Because if we keep doing the right task and it becomes a habit, all of a sudden, like I said earlier, we have the right mindset. Now everything we're looking at, family, spiritually, work, relationships, we're focusing on the right task first. What's the one thing I need to get done to make this relationship better? Okay? What's the one thing I need to get done today when I get to work to reach my goals? When I get home, what is the one thing I could do with my kids that'll make the difference? And then the rest falls into place. Okay? What's the one thing? We start thinking that, then our mindset, and then all of a sudden we start surrounding ourselves with the right people who help us get to our one thing. So keep asking yourself over and over, probably to the point of going overboard, but you create this habit of what's the one thing I can do right now? Okay, keep focus on the one thing in general. What's the one thing I can do today to get there? Okay, what's the one thing I can do with my family to get there? What's the one thing I can do, at the gym for my body? What's the one thing I can do today to make sure I'm healthy? Okay. So we stack these things up, prioritize them. It's not just one thing that I can do today for everything. We got to think about these other things. Spiritual life, physical health, personal life, key relationships, business, financial life. Okay. Sounds like a lot, but we got to start. Again, just take the step. What's the first thing you're going to focus on? Spiritual. What can I do to improve my relationship with God? What's the one thing I can do to improve my relationship with God? Your relationship, what is the one thing I can do to improve my relationship with my spouse? And then we start looking at what's the one thing I can do right now to improve my relationship with my spouse. See how that works? What's the one thing I can do to help others? What's the one thing I can do right now to help others? All right. Notice I asked all the hard questions first. Okay, the hard questions. What can I do to improve my relationship with my spouse? That's a harder question than what can I do to what is the one thing I can do to improve my business today? Anybody will ask that when we figure it out, but you got to ask the hard questions too. But, you know, keep in mind, you have to keep asking this. You have to develop that habit. Once it's a habit, the habit will decide the future. Habits are stronger than words. Habits are stronger than actions. Habits are cumulative, consistent, repetitious actions. So, all right, that was chapter 11. It was pretty short, but it's the habit, the success habit. We ask the question, we keep asking it because it becomes a habit. All right, so then we need the answers. Okay, we ask big questions, we need big answers. All right, let's look here. I'll pull up this other image. All right, so the idea is to go big and be specific. All right, so this, after I read this yesterday, I got into a meeting and this came right to play. It was perfect. I was listening and we were talking and I was just sitting there listening and I heard this come out. Okay, the problem was, I mean, this graph here shows talks about improving sales, doubling our sales. All right. So if we look at quadrant, 4, says what can I do to increase sales by 5% this year? Okay, that's a pretty broad question, and it talks about, yeah, even the market could increase 5% and your sales go up. All right. So, what can I? So better one. We jump to quadrant 2. It says, what can I do to better my double my sales? Okay. Still too many options, not specific. But when we get to quadrant 1 and it says, what can I do to double sales in 6 months? Now we got a timeline. Now we got a big goal and a specific goal. All right. So it's not broad. It's not small. It's big and specific. So this is the situation. We were talking about MegaCamp at Keller Williams, and they're talking about getting people to MegaCamp. All right, so they had goals of how many people they would like to get to MegaCamp, and they had by MegaCamp. It was too broad. Okay, what can we do in the next 2 months to get this many people to MegaCamp? That's a better goal. All right, so it has to be specific. It has to be big, or else our answers aren't going to be, they aren't going to suffice. They aren't going to clarify the one things I need to do right now. There's no urgency in it. Okay, because if I say, what can I do to double my sales? Then I'm doing the doable things. I'm not extending myself beyond the doable. I'm hoping. All right, it doesn't help me clearly define what I can do right now. What extraordinary task do I have to do right now to double sales in 6 months? Okay. When we get big and specific, we go beyond stretching what an average person will do. I mean, let's talk about the word stretch. Who stretches normally? I bet you the average person, I'm probably below average actually. The average person probably, they don't stretch daily. Okay, same in business. We don't stretch in business. All right, but we need to get beyond stretching. When we get big and specific goals, we need to go beyond stretching to the realm of possibility. Okay, that zone requires effort. We have to do our homework. All right, it requires us to get outside our comfort zone, get outside the box, and research. Makes us look and see what other higher producers are doing. Find a pattern of what they're doing. Find a trend of what they're doing. See what works and what we can do. Okay, so we can model after people that are doing certain tasks, that they share certain tasks that are successful, and we can do those tasks Then we set a benchmark of the average. It's like, if I do these tasks, I should get to this. This is the trend. This is where I'm going to get. And once we set that, now we create possibility. Now we know that if we can do it, and we do it, and we do it well, our possibilities are exponential. Now we can get to that doubling the sales in 6 months. It goes past doable, past stretch. We model these behaviors, our behaviors, after the tasks and habits and strategies, of these successful agents that are doing something we can do that fits our model, our personality. So be sure to select the right model, or because the possibilities could be good or bad. You can set the benchmark and the trend. You can see the models. You can see what works. And if it's something you can't do well enough, the possibilities could be worse, could be catastrophe. All right? So you have to be careful. But you do, again, we have to take a step. We got to ask a big question. And then we have to push ourselves to find the one task I can do right now to get these positive results. All right? I think I talked about this in chapter 1, or the part 1. We can't grow unless we get out of our comfort zone. If we're comfortable, we're not growing. And I read this in a book. Let me pull this up real quick. I read this in a book this morning about this very thing, about being comfortable. Okay, 1 second. I know it's here. It talks about contribution. I think Dean mentioned this book, The Noble Samurai. 1 second. I know it's here. Okay. Is it? Okay. So it talks about middle class in a comfort zone. It says, I'm going to read this whole thing right here. Each economic class has a different challenge that centers around giving in general. I'd say that the middle class is in a comfort zone. Mediocrity is a selfish pursuit. And it says, if we're not striving for more because we're comfortable, then we care more about our own condition than we do about others. So think about that. Being in your comfort zone, in essence, is being selfish. Because if you don't push yourself and use your talents and make yourself better to where you could put yourself in a position to help teach or, pass on some of your knowledge to someone else so they can be successful, or someone can model after you and make themselves successful, then you're being selfish. Got to get out of the comfort zone. If we're not uncomfortable, we're not growing. All right? Doubling your results doesn't mean doubling your work, because you're probably already working too hard to get where you're at. So Dean talked about slowing down to go faster. This is it. You slow down, you research, you focus, you concentrate, ask yourself the question, and then you take off. Okay? You skyrocket. Stop and research. See what everyone else is doing. Find the pattern and direction and move and change. Take the step. Don't be afraid of change, because change is growth. At the meeting the other day, I heard someone say, the ABCs of failure, is anything but change. Anything but change. That was awesome. The ABCs of failure is anything but change. If you're not changing, you're not growing. If you're not going forward, you're going backwards. You can't stay in one place in this world today. Okay? It'll pass you by. Get out of your comfort zone and grow. All right. So we have part 3 left. Okay? But in 2 weeks, when we get back together, instead of doing part 3, I want to do this. This will be fun. I want everybody to do a 1-3-5. Okay? If you don't know what that is, I put the 1-3-5 form on our Facebook files. I want everybody to do a 1-3-5. Okay? What's your one thing? What's your one goal by the end of this year? What's the one thing you want to accomplish, and make it not just attainable. Make it bigger that's going to stretch you. Okay? Don't make it unrealistic. Okay? There's a difference between realistic and attainable. All right? Let's be realistic of what your possibilities are. Okay? If you normally do 2.5 million in production and you say, well, I want to do 2.75 or I want to do 3. Okay? That's attainable. Let's not do that. Let's get realistic. If you can do 2.5, you can do 4 or even 5 or more. Let's be realistic. Let's not be unrealistic. Let's think about what we can do. All right? Where we're at right now, if we're just normally doing 2 to 2.5, you know, saying 10 or 15 might be something beyond realistic. Think of something we can do. Set a realistic goal, not an attainable goal. One thing by the end of the year. And then after that one thing, you to get to that one thing, there's 3 categories. All right? These 3 categories are what you're going to focus on, because under each of those categories are the prioritized things that you need to do to get to that one thing this year. And then so put that together. I'm even going to put one together, and we'll discuss them next time we get together in 2 weeks. So the one thing you want to accomplish between now and the year end, the 3 things by focusing on will help you achieve it. And under each of those, list in order of priority what you can do for the particular task to be successful. All right. Any questions on this? Anybody got anything to add? Any experiences? Any thoughts? Going once. I know there's like a 60-second lag on this, so I'm not sure there's a lag on the question, though. Thanks, Katie. You're welcome. This is good stuff. And you know what? As I've read this book, you know how many times that I've quoted out of this book in the past week? It pops up all of the time. All of the time. No matter what's discussion. My son, you know, had nothing to do with real estate or business or anything. The one thing is way beyond real estate. It's way beyond this business. It's something that we can apply. I'm going to give this to a chiropractor friend when I get done marking it up. Okay? Not for his business, but because he's venturing off in these other things to kind of, you know, make a better life when he really just needs to focus on one thing. Okay? That's what it comes down to. Asking yourself the question and getting the great answer. Shaping your life. So, all right. I will see you guys in a couple weeks. Mark's on next week. I think he's, you know, shaking off the baby hangover here. I just saw him walk in. So we will see you guys in a couple weeks. Have a good weekend.